Hello and welcome everyone to a new episode of the Expat Coaches Hangout. Today I am super happy to have Megan Nichols with me from I'm assuming sunny Mexico. That's the reason you moved there, right?
Just for the sunshine, yes. Anything is more sunny than Manchester, to be honest.
Well, that's true. If that's your frame of reference, I guess. All right. When Megan and I spoke about her coming to hang out with me, we were tossing around a couple of words that could be the theme for a session today. But we didn't toss around much because it feels like everything in Megan's work sphere has to do with language. So that's what we fell to. That's what we decided was going to be the topic of our session today. You want to maybe introduce yourself, tell us a little bit what you do, and why we figured that language was the topic we wanted to talk about today.
Absolutely. Thank you. Just to clarify, I do have other hobbies and interests apart from languages.
What?
That's not my
No, you
only
have to
thing.
go. That's okay. That discussion finished. You have to leave.
But I am pretty much a language nerd as both a learner and a teacher. So I think that is a good word, and that's why we chose it. And it's just such an important experience from an expat perspective to have the language or to learn a new language or sometimes not. And I've had the experience on both sides, so that's why it felt like a good fit. But yes, I have been teaching English for 10 years, on and off, in person and online. And last year I started my own business, Mega Language Coach. And I also learn languages, so I studied German and French, and yeah, fell in love with living in Germany. You might say otherwise, Julie.
That's okay.
And then
I think it's the grass is always greener type of thing. A
yeah,
lot of like if you grow up in a place, you see it with different eyes than people who move there.
yes, people are always very excited about traveling to the UK, and I'm like, why? So I totally understand. And yeah, now I'm in Mexico and I'm learning Spanish, and this is the first language that I'm learning kind of on the streets from scratch, whereas the other two I studied them in a more formal and academic way. So I'm getting a whole different experience, and still teaching English.
Yeah. And you teach online and do you also teach in person?
Not since COVID. I love having students from all over the world, and technology makes that possible. So I have students in Brazil and all over Europe. I even had one in Australia the other day. So I love the
Oh, that would be
flexibility
an
that gives me.
interesting time difference though, right? Between Mexico and Australia.
Yeah, it was unusual, but it's just amazing to get to witness other people's journeys, and I learn a lot from my clients as well, which I enjoy.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's like 70% of why I do what I do is so I get to learn from others. I get to witness amazing transformations. I get to
Yeah,
see what cool things other people do, right?
absolutely.
All right.
So
And
yeah.
yeah, so language in an expat context. What comes to mind first when we mention that?
And it's lack of language skills, if I'm honest, and living in this expat bubble, especially if you're an English speaker. I think this reputation comes with it of Americans or Brits moving abroad and not accommodating and acclimatizing to a new language. And in effect, that means you're not really integrating into the culture or the workplace or the friends or all of that that comes with it. I really feel like language is the key to unlocking a lot of new opportunities, and I think that's often missed, unfortunately.
But to be fair, I think if you're a native English speaker, it's easier to just hide because people are so excited to practice their English most of the time. So it's a lot easier to find people who are excited to talk to you in your native language rather than if your first language is Swahili or Czech or, something a
Yeah,
little more unusual.
yeah, absolutely. And it's kind of a double-edged sword. A lot of people have basic, if not conversational, English skills, and that's great when you're at the pharmacy or in the supermarket and you haven't got that new vocabulary yet. But then it makes it so much easier not to learn the language because you're not forced to. when I first arrived in Germany and I was 19 and I barely spoke any German apart from what I'd learned from a textbook. I had to learn how to ask for all of these things and speak to people because it was just like, okay, I want to be able to communicate with you in your language, you know? So,
Yeah, and I think it takes a certain bravery though to do that because it is, I mean, I don't know where you were in Germany when you first got here, but I feel like if you're in a larger town, it's easier to just go with, oh, I'll just hang out where I'll find somebody who'll speak English, right? Whereas if
yeah.
you're somewhere in the countryside, that's less easy.
Yeah, I was in a little rural place with the Hessish accent, so that made it even a little bit more complicated, but it's all part of the experience, you know?
Nice. So you mentioned the expat bubble. This is something that I see a lot, especially with, I mean, my clients going to China, right? That's a whole different level of
Right.
do I really want to learn that language if I know that I'm only staying here for 2 to 3 years? Can I even learn that language that fast? Is there a point, right? What would you say to somebody who has those arguments or who brings those arguments to the table of, well, I'm only here for a short while. Why should my clients learn Chinese?
I feel like I got to pitch language learning, but it's okay because I'm always an advocate of it, and it's not 0 or 100%. Like you don't need to learn the entire Chinese language, for example, and you don't need to only speak in English. Like there is a whole spectrum in between, and just learning a few phrases is going to be super helpful because the locals are going to realize that you're making an effort, and in my experience, you're going to be met with a lot more generosity and a lot more grace and respect. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's kind of how it is. And people appreciate that you make an effort. So I think the life would be a lot easier if you start learning. It's very, I think it could be described as ignorant to go in with the attitude like, oh, what's the point? Because you're moving to a new country and you would hope that people would speak to you or attempt to speak to you in your language in your home country as well. So I think it's showing open-mindedness to a new way of life and accepting that that's your life, even if it's just for a short period of time.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and that's part of the reason why part of the product that I sell, the Thrive in China package, has language classes in it, right? Because
Yeah.
and that's exactly what we try to do is we try to pare it down to, okay, what can you learn in about 20 hours of self-study and then five one-on-one classes? That's what's in the package. That will actually help you get further.
Goal isn't complete fluency, I imagine.
Well, that would be very ambitious with 25 hours.
Exactly, but you can still make a big impact with a small amount of
Yeah,
time investment or money investment. And it does, I think, make a big difference to the people that are traveling there because then they can use these like little tips and phrases.
yeah. And I don't know for you, but for me, it's always it's like doing the paring it down to the essentials. It's kind of like the gateway drug because once you've learned those, then you are much more likely to be like, oh, but if I could say this extra thing and that extra, and if I could talk about this particular topic, that would really help me in this situation. And that's how you basically you get deeper and deeper into it. And then, you become the weirdo like me
Then
who,
you're hooked like us.
yeah.
Yeah, I rarely start with a new client and go, okay, here's all the grammar structures you're going to need, or here are all the tense formations. Like, I love it because I'm a language nerd. Most people don't love it because they want to be able to use it and have the functional language. And then later down the line, I might go, oh, by the way, this is a second conditional. And they're like, tell me more. And I'm like, yes, got you now. But that's
Nice.
never the way to open it, you know?
No, no, I don't. There are very few people who are masochists to a degree that they're like, oh yeah, hit me with the grammar. Or,
Just
for
me.
Chinese, like characters and tones and all that fun stuff. Yeah.
Because if you think about how we learn language as a baby, and I think language acquisition is really important. You never sit down a baby and say, okay, here's the all the words that you need to know. It's just the absorption and the exposure, and being integrated into that and hearing it on a regular basis. And then they learn it almost by osmosis, and it's a much more natural way of learning. And I think trying to recreate that as an adult is way more valuable than the force feeding method.
But again, I think it takes bravery because it takes
Yeah.
falling down a gazillion, bajillion times before you can actually walk. And as adults, it's more like, okay, so if you teach me exactly how I need to move my foot, then I can walk. And just, like teach me the mechanics behind it. And a lot of people approach language learning that way.
Yeah, a big part of my program is mindset. And we realize when we kind of pare it all down, we realize that the English is not the big problem that they think it is, or the language is not the problem. It's the mindset and the confidence and the coaching that comes with that, because it's actually this fear of failure, it's this perfectionism, it's the imposter syndrome, and all of that that comes with it. As you said, as an adult, the ego comes because we don't want to fall, or we've not been taught how to fall and how to recover. So yeah, that's a big part of what we do. And you're right, the bravery is important.
Mm. And I think it's it's all like a lot of it is in the teaching also and how you approach it as a teacher.
Mhm.
And if you have like if you have a way of showing that it's, of course you're gonna if somebody doesn't pronounce something the way they should, or if they make a grammar mistake, you're gonna correct them, but without going all like, sit down, this was terrible. This is how it's done. Because then who would dare make a mistake again, right?
Yeah, it's definitely lead by example. Sometimes I speak German in my sessions just to prove to my clients that, okay, look, I really struggle with all 16 of the cases and it's difficult and I won't get it right every time. I'm not expecting you to get it right every time in English, but I'm still able to communicate with you, and that's the key difference, perfection versus progress.
Mm. And so do you have a lot of, you mentioned clients from Brazil, I'm assuming not from Australia, but in Australia. Uh,
Yeah.
which again, I find that interesting. A Brit sitting in Mexico teaching somebody who lives in Australia, but okay, well, he's not going to judge.
Vacation, to be fair, though, one of my existing clients that went on vacation. But yeah, it's so international and there's so many different cultural elements that I can explain. And I'm learning at the same time as well. It was definitely an important part of my language learning that, okay, this is a word and this is the history behind it, this is the meaning, this is why it exists. And I love doing that and explaining that and hearing about it from other people.
Yeah, well, that is for me, that's a very dangerous path. We're not going to go down it today because otherwise we will get stuck in some, going down some rabbit trail. But no, I agree. And for a Chinese, I find for a Chinese that's especially interesting because with the characters you have an added layer to it because the way that the character is made up, you there's a lot of history that comes through from that.
Yeah,
Or
how
even
fascinating.
yeah, it's so fun. Like one of my favorite ones that if people are like, oh, what do you mean? One of my favorite ones is ma shang, which means immediately, like soon, and ma means horse, and shang means on. So it's like, how do you get there immediately? By going, like by riding
Get
there,
on your horse.
basically. Exactly. Get on your horse and get there. So
Wow.
that's one that I love. But yeah, there's a lot of those. You mentioned that right now you're learning Spanish and are you not taking any classes or are you doing a mixture?
No, not really. I'm trying to learn it on the go, which is difficult because I work from home and you have to push yourself to kind of go out and make these mistakes, knowing that you're going to meet people and say the wrong thing. But I've tried to take a different, more gentle approach in the past with German and French because it was academic. It was very much, okay, get to the next European framework standard. Okay, we're going
Mhm.
to get to B2 or whatever. And the exams were there and there was a lot more pressure. With this, I'm doing it for fun and I want to learn it and it will create new opportunities for me, but there's less time restrictions. So one thing I've done, which has been different this time, is going to language exchanges. And so I'm meeting local people, but also people from all over the world that have loads of different languages. And that feels way more fun and social and exciting than sitting down reading a grammar book.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and then you can, I mean, with Spanish also what's exciting is that even if you're doing it in Mexico, you can have other Spanish speakers from other South American countries, for
Yeah.
instance, and their
And the
Spanish
accent
is
is so
very
different.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, hey, Spanish is Spanish, it's universal, it'll be fine. It's really not. I
No.
have lots of friends from Argentina, and I'm like, sorry, this is the language that I thought I was learning. Are you sure? So that's been interesting.
And I think it's, yeah, sometimes it's words, but sometimes it's also just complete sentence structures and where you're like, okay, this, all right, well, if you say so.
Pronunciation, yeah.
Mhm.
But it's all part of it and it's fun. And it's the same as when I have my clients telling me they want to have a perfect English accent. And I say, well, yeah, we have a lot of different accents in the UK alone, let alone the US, South
Well,
Africa,
and
Ireland.
even if they're like, oh, well, I want an English accent, like what is that, right? Is that like is that a Cockney accent? Is that a people
Exactly.
from Yorkshire will be,
I was just
like
going to say,
Liverpudlian. It's like,
yeah,
okay.
go have
That's
tea with
different.
somebody from Yorkshire and somebody from Cornwall, and then we can talk about a British accent because it doesn't exist.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about accents. What do you tell especially if we're talking expats, right? If somebody moves to an English-speaking country, do you tell people to work on their accents, or what's your take on that?
I wrote a blog post on this because I feel very strongly about it, that accents are part of our identity. And I will never tell a client, okay, we need to get rid of your accent. Because I was told that so often, especially when I was learning French, less so in German, um, that I needed to get rid of my accent. And it's so linked with our history and our culture and where we've come from. Why are we trying to erase that? Because I will always be British. I will always be born in Manchester. And whether I'm speaking Spanish, French, or whatever, that's always going to be true. I think the difference is if you can't be understood in the target language, that's what we're going to work on. And I do a lot of pronunciation practice. The way English is written and spoken is very different, unlike German. So we definitely do a lot of that, but it's not trying to get the erasure of their uh, accent, and it's not trying to get a perfect accent because there are so many varieties of this.
There is
Perfection
no
doesn't
such
exist.
thing. Agreed. Yeah.
So yeah,
Hmm. Well,
yeah.
again, for English, I get that, right? Because I feel like even you get five English speakers from five different countries and you have them like sound out the same word, you might get five different versions.
Mhm.
And so that makes it even harder to call something a good accent. In Chinese, you have the added problem that if your tones are off, people won't even understand what you're saying. Um,
As diverse as English, like do they have different accents depending on
it's
regions?
super diverse,
Yeah,
but you have a lot of local languages. So we're not talking I mean, you have local accents, but you have local languages that are
yeah.
as different as, say, German and Dutch.
Wow, okay. So you have to learn it
So
almost again.
that means everyone is learning 普通话, is learning the like standard Chinese, Mandarin Chinese, but how they pronounce it may be different. Depending on where they're from. And but that means that for a foreigner, I feel like there's an added layer of complexity to it because yes, not every Chinese person speaks like says tones perfectly. So it's a tone is basically the sound is the same, but the intonation is different. And so you have like a high flat one, you have a rising one, you have a one that dips, and you have one that goes down in Mandarin. And then Cantonese is worse. And like there's
I'll
other
stick to
languages that
Spanish,
are
I think.
that might be a smart thing. But the thing is, if you can have two words that in the transliteration are exactly the same, but
Mhm.
the tones are different, and so they need something completely different. Like I had I once had a 10-minute conversation with somebody about, because I was too proud to, this was back in the era of, we had dictionaries on, paper.
Wow, okay.
That's how long ago we're talking. 10-minute conversation because I was too proud. I was like, nope, not going to take the dictionary out. No, 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 no. I know this word. I can make you understand me. And it was the difference between chemistry and going skiing. And the way that I pronounced it was, yeah, one is Huaxue and one is Huaxue. And so
Wow, okay.
yeah, I kept
It's a whole new
going.
challenge.
It was horrible. Well, it was horrible, but also here I am 20 years later talking about it.
You
So it was
remember it.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was, and I kept going because we were at a fair and like a trade fair, and there was a German company there, and then I was walking with this person, and I was like, oh, this is a German company. She's like, oh, what's it called? And I said, Südchemie. And then I was like, oh, I know both of those words, right? Like I know Nan. Nan is south. I know that one. And then I thought I knew chemistry, and she looked at me. Oh, like in winter? I was like, excuse me? Yeah, in winter, like down the mountain, like this. I was like, what? No, no, chemistry, chemistry, like
Yeah.
in school, and then it goes boom, and she's like, no.
And this is when all the gestures and wild gesticulations come out, and it's like, I'm going back to basics here. What is happening?
Yeah, it's
But you got there in
frustrating.
the end, right?
We did, and I think somebody probably ended up pulling out a dictionary. I blotted that part out. I just remember the very lengthy conversation that led up to finally understanding one another. But yeah,
Yeah.
so I feel like, yes, accent is one thing, but if it interferes with how you're being understood or not, then that makes it hard.
Yeah, we have this a lot with vowel sounds in English. Like bit and beat or live and leave. And a lot of people will tell me, you're saying the same thing. And I'm like, no, one is long and one is short, and it changes the complete meaning. So in this case, we will work on the accent, but it's more
Mhm.
of like the pronunciation of the words to be understood, you know?
Yeah. And I feel that's often a problem depending on what like what your mother tongue is, because there are
Mhm.
some languages that have those differences and others that don't. Like if I once attempted to teach a very nice Polish lady English. She spoke some German, and that's why we went through German to teach her English. Long story. But for her, same thing. Like keys and kiss sounded the same because both the z and the s in Polish apparently it's something in between for both.
Yep.
And also long and short vowels. She didn't hear the difference. And often I feel like if the students can hear that there is a difference, then it's easier for them to also learn and shape their mouth in a way that makes that sound.
Yeah, it's so hard to replicate a sound that you've never used before. I have the same issue with my Spanish, the R. We just don't really have that. And a lot of my German clients, like the TH, like the
Hmm.
is really difficult because it's like, well, I'm now 50 years old and I'm trying to make this sound with my mouth for the first time. And we really have to go back to basics and look, okay, where is the tongue? Where is the teeth? Where are we pushing the air through? And go back to basics. And that can be, like you said, an ego thing, and it can hit them because it feels like this is very childish, you know?
Well, and I think it's hilarious that you're using the word childish because now I'm thinking of a small child that they just do it over and over and over again. And I can
Mhm.
even like my son is 3.5, and it's hilarious how he will talk to himself while he's playing, and you can hear him practicing words basically. Like there's a word that we read in a storybook. He will be using that word as he's talking to himself while he plays. He'll say it over and over and over and over again. And it's like, oh, so that's how you practice. Interesting.
Yeah. And that's the most natural way of doing it. And you say it so many times until you feel comfortable with it. But we as adults then have this fear of standing in front of the mirror going 20 times just to see if it sounds good.
And that's nothing. 20 times? Not like that's ridiculous. That's not practice. That's barely a drop in the
Yeah.
bucket.
I'm trying to be encouraging and motivate people to learn languages here.
Nah.
Ever the realist. Okay.
So, you say language learning, yes, definitely for any expat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't think of a reason why not.
Okay.
I can't think of a compelling reason why you wouldn't want to integrate yourself to some extent and find friends and look for jobs and do the basic things because otherwise it's going to be a very lonely experience.
Yeah. And I get that quite a bit with clients, especially if English is not their first language. Because if English is their first language, as we have already established, you often have people who will want to practice, right? But if there's an international community that speaks English, but you don't speak English or you don't speak it well, and then your first language is something else, like I don't know, French or Italian or Spanish or something, then that makes it really hard. Because then all
Yeah.
of a sudden you're dealing with three separate languages, only one of which you feel comfortable with, but that no one else speaks. So,
Yeah, and a whole lot of your identity gets wrapped in it. I don't know about you, but when I speak different languages, I have different parts of my personality which shine more than others. I feel I'm a lot more organized in German. I'm a lot more chaotic and go with the flow in French or Spanish, you know? So I think for expats, if they can't access different parts of their identity when they're abroad, this can lead to more loneliness and isolation because they're not able to show the full extent of themselves, you know?
that's a really good point. I never thought of, I mean, I thought about, yes, you're a slightly different person in each of your languages. That I get, and that I've heard from others. But yeah, of that being a success factor for integration, that's brilliant. So cool.
Yeah. Just my thoughts. I don't know if that's the real experience, but I think being able to show up authentically and to your full spectrum is really important to happiness, but also like being able to make a life there and create foundations, even if it's not long term.
Hmm. Yeah, a lot of my clients, they're there for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, sometimes 5 years. But it feels like, okay, so what comes after, right? And is that um really, and that's where it's, well, people unlike us who think that language learning is actually fun. But if you see it as a chore, and I always wonder whether motivation for learning it is not the most important, like the make or break it of language learning itself. Like if you have a compelling reason to learn it, then it's gonna go a lot easier, I feel.
You have to hack your brain, Julie. You have to make it fun and you have to give your brain like the rewards so that it wants to learn and do the things that are enjoyable and that get kind of like the small checks. So it's like, hey, this is actually good. I want more of this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The first time you actually successfully communicated with a cab driver, for instance, or
Yeah.
the time you successfully figured out which pack of milk you wanted to buy or something. It's definitely those are definitely the small wins that make it worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that joy will, I think, create momentum to keep going.
Mm. I'm looking at the time. I think we're almost out of time. How and where can people find you if they want to, and who should look for you? That's maybe like, what's your ideal client? Let's start with that and then go to the how they can find you.
Okay. So I love to help lots of different people in their English language journey. I've worked with beginners all the way to advanced. My corporate programs are probably best for intermediate learners, especially if they're looking for business English or professional use. So I have an interview prep course, or I have a business English course, and less popular, but one of my personal favorites, I have a grammar guru course. So these are very much orientated towards corporate settings. And then people that are looking for English for travel, or maybe, as we talked about, for an expat experience, or just being able to communicate on a day-to-day basis. Then I have conversation classes or power hours for something specific. And yeah, this is kind of the two options that I have depending on what you're looking for.
Mhm.
So I'm on Instagram, website. I'm also now on YouTube, which is exciting. And I have a newsletter which people can sign up to for free tips every month to improve their English and the whole coaching experience.
Mhm. Sounds good. So we will put everything in the description box, obviously, so that people can click on all those beautiful links. And
Yeah.
I am thinking, well, I was just thinking, Mexico and China, that's the perfect time difference because
Okay.
I think it's 12 or 13 hours. So it's like your morning is their evening and vice versa. So that should actually work out well.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, I'm mega language coach everywhere, so I'm hopefully easy to find.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Megan. And I have a well, I could talk about this topic for hours and hours and hours because but I think for the purpose of people going on an expat journey, maybe this is the cap. Maybe this is a good stopping point for now.
Yeah, perfect. The time has flown by. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I need to stop the recording. How do I stop?